Welcome to this week's webinar. Today's session will last around 10 minutes and we will be discussing GDPR and our top tips to prepare your organisation. I'm sure you are aware that the GDPR compliance deadline is fast approaching. In fact, currently it's only 120 days away. If you haven't yet started to design and develop your GDPR strategy, don't worry, it's not too late. A recent study carried out by Careers in Cybersecurity and London law firm Hamlins produced the following statistics on the readiness of UK companies for the impending change. They highlighted that 73% of organisations they questioned have not yet allocated any budget for compliance, and 53% are yet to appoint a data protection officer. So as you can see, if you're not yet prepared, you're probably among quite a lot of people. I'm now going to provide a brief recap of what GDPR is and how it is going to affect your organisation. On May 25, 2018, the General Data Protection Regulation, GDPR, will be enforced across Europe. The law aims to give citizens more control over their data and to create a uniformity of rules to enforce across the continent. Why should you care about GDPR? Although this law comes from the EU, it has global impact. It will affect any business holding personal data on customers, prospects or employees based within the EU. And as such, businesses need to be preparing for the change now. If businesses ignore the law, they can be fined up to €20 million or 4% of their annual global turnover. Giant fines aside, it's worth remembering that data protection is more than a compliance issue. Customers care about their privacy and expect businesses to respect that. So what are some of the key regulatory changes to GDPR? Some of the most notable changes put forward by the GDPR include the following updates and revisions. Extraterritorial applicability. Previously, data protection measures were taken in the context of the establishment, which meant that if companies processed data overseas, then they could not be punished for breaches in legislation. The GDPR is very clear on this matter. If the data belongs to EU citizens, then the new legislation applies regardless of where it is processed. An increase in the fines. The GDPR raises the level of financial penalty for breaches to 4% of the annual global turnover of a company, or €20 million, whichever represents the larger amount. Consent to data use. Companies will no longer be able to use long terms and conditions full of complex legal definitions and must now present the purposes of data processing in clear and plain regional language. Equally, facilities for the withdrawal of consent must be easily and simply accessible. As I previously mentioned, it is not too late to start planning your GDPR strategy. Here are our top 10 tips to prepare your organisation. Number 1. Appoint a data protection officer. It's important to determine whether your organisation requires a dedicated DPO. Even if you don't need one, it's a good idea to make one person or a team responsible for data governance to help ensure that you stay ahead of any potential changes to your responsibilities. Number 2, understand and inform. Ensure you and all members of your organisation understand the new rules and regulations that fall under GDPR, and that everyone understands their roles and responsibilities. Number 3, analyse your data. Review the data you hold. Which data is considered to be personal or sensitive, where that data is located, what you do with the data, who has access to the data, etc. If you haven't already, it's time to build a data inventory so you can easily understand your data estate. This can be done with a single data management system, providing you with a holistic view of your data. Number 4, procedures and processes. Take the time to evaluate your current privacy policies and identify where these may need to be updated. Complete a privacy audit with either an internal resource or through an external provider to understand your current situation and what you may need to change or update. Number 5, data access rights. Identify your current policies for data access rights and document how changes should be handled. It's important to ensure that all data processing activities have a clear legal basis for processing. Number 6, data subject consent. Review your current processes for seeking, obtaining and recording consent. Ensure that where appropriate, you have consent from data subjects for processing activities and whether that consent is still valid under the GDPR. Number 7, children's data. If applicable, implement new practices for age verification and guardian consent when processing children's data. Ensure that children's data is processed with the highest level of security in accordance with the GDPR. Number 8, data breaches. Implement a procedure for your organisation to detect, investigate, handle and report on data breaches. It's important to conduct data breach tests internally to stress test whether your procedures are adequate for the GDPR. Number 9, impact assessment. Familiarise yourself with the ICO's privacy impact and assessment and implement best practices within your organisation. Ensure that your GDPR policies are enterprise-wide and take into account all business activities. And finally, number 10, be prepared. Preparation is key for the GDPR. Don't wait until May 25th. Start planning and implementing your strategy now. If you would like to find out how our GDPR data discovery and management solution can help you to understand your data inventory, automate your data retention processes and respond to data subject access requests post May 25th, contact us today for further information.